of them. This is the main one. This is the large larynx model. So, a couple of things. This bone right here, you should know from AP1, what bone is this?
The
Hyoid bone. And what's special about it?
It doesn't articulate with any other bone.
It doesn't articulate with any other bone. So, hyoid bone, the rest of it is the larynx. So you have your epiglottis and glottis. Glottis is your opening, which is here. This opening that you're seeing. That's for the voice box. That's where the air comes in and out of. This opening in here. What's up here is your esophagus. So you have two openings, your esophagus and your trachea. Going to the lungs, okay? Trachea and the esophagus would be here. So that opening up here is the glottis. This is your epiglottis. What happens is when you swallow something, this closes. And when it closes, it allows food and water to go back into the esophagus, bypassing the tracheal opening. So what happens is, you guys see this moving? Okay, I'm going to put it on an angle. As you swallow, the musculature allows this ligament to come down, and that allows the food and water to go into this opening. When you are breathing or laughing and drinking something, and then you cough, that's because the water went into the wrong pipe. There's cilia in your trachea that get irritated. When they get irritated, you cough. So this is your epiglottis. Glottis is this opening to the larynx. Okay. Now, your elastic cartilage is what covers it. That's part of your epiglottis. Then we have your thyroid gland and parathyroid. So I'm going to put this away for a second. They ask you for thyroid. They can ask for this, which is on this model with the jaw. This is your thyroid gland. Everyone see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is the other model. This is the other model. This is your thyroid gland. Okay. So that thyroid gland, they will most likely take it off, and there's two little brown dots on the back, number 29. Write that down, number 29. That's your parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands. So parathyroid glands are number 29 on this thyroid model. Okay? There's two of them.
I have a question.
What?
Where are the parathyroid glands?
Right here, number 29, on the
Oh.
back of the thyroid.
Ah, I see.
So if you imagine your thyroid like this, there's also a second portion to the thyroid right here. It looks like a bow tie. If you were to take your thyroid gland and peel it off your trachea, you would see the two parathyroid glands on each side. So you have two on this one, and you would have two up here. So you have 4 parathyroid glands in total. Okay? So those are the parathyroid glands. Then you have your, what?
Well, 4 parathyroid glands?
4 parathyroid glands in total.
Oh, got it.
All right, so then we have your thyroid cartilage. This is your thyroid cartilage right here. This large structure, this large shield-shaped structure, and this point right here, that's called the laryngeal prominence. This is your Adam's apple. Adam's apple, right here, this tip. This tip. That's your Adam's apple right here.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Where's the thyroid gland?
Pay attention when I'm going over this. This is your thyroid cartilage. This is your laryngeal prominence right here.
Okay.
Okay? That's the Adam's apple. Now, cricoid cartilage, that's this ring underneath. It looks like a tiny ring, but if I flip it around, you can see it's much bigger. Okay? So, thyroid, cricoid. Thyroid, cricoid. Everyone understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, in movies, when they do an emergency tracheostomy, they inevitably always do it in the wrong location. Where do they do it?
Here.
Right here, which is literally the worst place to do it. Because what do you have there?
Thyroid gland.
Thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is very vascular. You see all the red blood vessels? If you cut into that, you'll bleed out. You only cut there when you're in the OR when there's help. What you do is you do it here, between the thyroid and the cricoid cartilage. So this is where that emergency tracheostomy is supposed to go. But in the movies, they always do it in the wrong location. It's up here, okay? Because there's nothing up here that you can damage. Now, corniculate cartilage and the arachnoid cartilage. I'm gonna take this, and you see these two horns?
Yeah.
Everyone see the horns?
Yeah.
Okay. You have muscles that are attached. Those muscles are controlled by the recurrent laryngeal nerves. You have one on each side. So you have two recurrent laryngeal nerves. You don't need to know about that. But when they activate the muscle, what they do is this. Everyone see what's happening? Okay? So if those laryngeal nerves are working and they activate the vasculature, the musculature, that causes the corniculate, that causes the arachnoid cartilage to move, and you open up the space. Everyone see this?
Oh.
So you have one on each side. If one of them you accidentally cut during surgery or it gets damaged, this is what happens. You see how the other side is not moving? As long as it moves, you can get air in. If both of them are shot, this is it. You can't breathe. You need the corniculate cartilage, which is the little tips up here, and the arachnoid cartilage. So how you're gonna remember is this. If you remember during Halloween, got that really shitty candy, the candy corn? This looks like a little candy corn.
Oh, that's the,
Corniculate.
okay.
The arachnoid, right here, that's the corniculate, the little one. The arachnoid, this sort of looks like the letter A if you're looking at it from this angle. So when we're done, if you look at it from the front end at an angle through these holes, these cartilages from the front look like the letter A. Capital A.
So the arachnoid is like the form itself, but the
Corniculate is the
is the
tip.
tip of it.
Corniculate is the tip. Arachnoid is the full cartilage.
Oh, of course.
Arachnoid is the full cartilage. Corniculate is the
Tip of the cartilage.
tip.
The tip of the arachnoid cartilage.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, so what they cover is the true vocal folds. This is what allows you to make a sound. This right here, okay? So what happens is depending on how taut it is, how loose it is, how much air you're forcing through, how tense it is, that'll give you pitch, intensity, and different wave patterns. So that is your true vocal cords right there. This right now where my finger is in is your true vocal cord. That is your elastic ligament as well. So essentially it's ligaments that are covered by tissue, your mucosal tissue. So right where my finger is in is where the vocal fold is. If this ever gets blocked for whatever reason, because you have cancer or you swallowed something and it got stuck, the only other way to get air in an emergency situation is here, or when you put a tracheostomy, you put it here in the OR. That's to bypass this area. Everyone understand? Okay. So that's essentially everything on that first page that we just went through. Okay? So those are the main structures. This is going to be the most likely model that they will use. However, this model is also fair game for thyroid and cricoid. And this model is definitely for your thyroid gland and especially your parathyroid glands.
Oh, you read the red part?
No, the brown parts, they're number 29,
Ah, the brown part. Got it.
okay? Now, go to the next page. Now we get to the respiratory tree. So, I'm gonna show you this sits basically like this. So underneath this, you have all of this. So this is your trachea. Your trachea has C-shaped rings. What's on the back part of the trachea?
Your
Esophagus.
Esophagus. And what's behind the esophagus?
Your spine.
Your spine. So you have your spine, your esophagus, which is soft tissue, and then you have your trachea, which is semi-hard. So if you had an O-shaped ring and your vertebrae is circular, the only thing soft is your esophagus. So now the problem is if you swallow something, what happens if it's too big?
Then it stops like.
It gets stuck. It gets stuck. So what your body did was on the back part, you don't have an O-shaped ring, you have a C-shaped ring like this. So the back part of the wall is just soft tissue, soft muscle. So this on the back of the trachea, see what I'm pointing to? That is called the trachealis muscle, right here. So the back part of the trachea has the trachealis muscle, which also becomes the front of the esophagus. And so the reason why you have it is when you swallow something that is bigger, that's as big as the opening for the esophagus, the trachealis muscle will bulge into your trachea. Does that make sense?
Can you repeat that again?
The trachealis muscle, if you swallow something, it'll bulge into the trachea.
Okay.
That's why the back part is soft, and it's not a O-shape. It's not a O-shaped ring. It's a C-shaped ring.
Do you mean like it'll shape as it?
Yeah. So
Okay.
like these rings, they're C-shaped like this.
Okay.
They're not like a circle.
Okay.
Okay. So the C-shaped rings for the trachea are here.
Oh.
One second. So the reason why you have them is to keep the airway open. So you don't actually have to do anything. The tracheal rings keep your airway open. But the back portion is where the trachealis muscle is. This is what allows you to swallow, but also what allows you to generate that cough to get the stuff out. But for that to happen, it's cartilage on 3 sides. The back part is soft.
So like sometimes when you feel like you get something stuck in your throat, right? But you're not really choking, it's just like stuck in your esophagus. Is it because
It's your esophagus and trachealis muscle spazzing out. So your esophagus back here and your trachea up here, your trachea has what's called cilia. So if you smoke or you live in a area with really bad air quality, that cilia get destroyed. So when it gets destroyed, you still make mucus. That mucus then falls down. The way those cilia work is they beat up. So what they're trying to do is help bring the mucus out, and then you either cough it out or you swallow it. If you swallow it, where's it gonna end up?
your stomach?
Stomach, right? Your stomach has acid, which will break it down. So you either cough it out or you swallow it. The issue with your trachea, when you smoke or live in an area with really bad or poor air quality and you destroy the cilia, you can't bring anything up. So people that smoke a lot have that really bad hacking cough. What they're trying to do is they're trying to generate power to bring all that gunk up. That's why they cough like that, because the cilia is destroyed. If you stop smoking, within a couple of months, the cilia starts to grow back. Okay? So when the cilia starts to grow back, your lungs sort of function. So this is midline in your chest. Okay? Then your trachea up to here, right at this point right here is called the carina. Okay? The carina right here. You see where my finger's at? Right before it splits? It's a
internal ridge.
right here on the bottom, right before it splits, the very bottom. Okay? Now on the inside of your trachea, the carina has an overabundance of cilia. It's very sensitive. So anything that happens to go into your trachea and hits that point will make you cough like crazy until you get it out. Okay? From that carina, you split into 2. So you have your left lung over here and your right lung. So from your trachea, you go into the primary bronchus. Primary bronchus is this. Look at where I'm pointing to. You see this little bit? You see where the bit right between my finger and my thumb? That is the right main bronchus, or the primary bronchus on the right side. Okay? Now watch before you write anything down. That's the right. The left, you see what I'm holding right now? That's the left. So you see where it's splitting? So here and here. Now you see what I'm pointing to?
Yeah.
Where my fingers are? That's your primary bronchus on the left and the right. Okay? The left one is obviously longer because what's here?
Okay.
The heart. Your heart is here, so the left one is longer, okay? Now the right one, there's a couple of characteristics. It's shorter, right? Everyone see that?
Yeah.
Shorter compared to this. It's more straighter because the left one sort of has to go on in an angle, okay? And it's wider. So shorter, wider, and straighter. So essentially what that's telling you is anything that ends up in your trachea, most of the time is gonna end up in your right main bronchus. Right main bronchus, okay? So the bronchus, the reason why it's called the right main bronchus or the primary bronchus is because it's going to what? Huh? Lungs. So the right main bronchus or the left main bronchus, so whenever you hear main bronchi or primary bronchi, they're going to each lung. They're going to each lung. Okay? We're gonna do secondary bronchi in a minute. Now, you see all the colored bits? The blue, the green, the yellow, orange, all of this? That's your tertiary bronchi. Tertiary bronchi. All these colored bits are your tertiary bronchi. Everyone see that?
Yeah.
So we've done the primary that go to each lung and the tertiary so far. The tertiary are just further going into your lung. So where are the secondary? The secondary are between the primary. So you see where the primary ends? Here and here. And the tertiary start, where the colors start. It's whatever is in between is your secondary.
Secondary.
You guys see what I'm pointing to?
Oh wait, that's a secondary. as well?
Secondary bronchi.
Is between your tertiary.
Between your tertiary and the primary,
Okay, got it.
okay? So it's here and here. You guys see what I'm pointing to?
Yeah.
The secondary go to each lobe. Each lobe. So the right has how many?
2.
The right has 3. 3 secondary bronchi. The right side has 3 secondary bronchi because you have 3 lobes on the right side. The left side, because there's the heart, you only have 2 lobes. So you have 2 secondary bronchi on the left, okay? So in total, you have 2 primary bronchi, 1 for each lung, 5 secondary bronchi, 3 for the right, 2 for the left, and then you have hundreds and thousands of tertiary bronchi, which you can't count. They just go further into the lobes. So the reason why it starts out as one large pipe and it gets progressively smaller and smaller and smaller is because this is eventually going to do this. This is the actual working portion of the lung, the alveoli. So air goes in, it just keeps going, primary, trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary. We haven't done these yet, and eventually it'll get here. This is where the exchange takes place. Okay, so make sure I finished everything in respiratory model. So we've done everything here. Now we're gonna talk about what happens here. So from the tertiary, you will have what's called the terminal bronchiole and the respiratory bronchiole. How do you tell what's what on here? You see where the blue is? Guys see where the blue is?
Yeah, yeah.
That blue is the terminal bronchiole because this is still the cartilage. Cartilage. So terminal bronchiole still has cartilage. Okay? Terminal bronchiole still has cartilage. The respiratory bronchiole does not. The respiratory bronchiole does not. It is just soft tissue. It's basically smooth muscle. So respiratory bronchiole is smooth muscle. So now you have trachea, which has cartilage, primary bronchi that has cartilage, secondary bronchi that has cartilage, tertiary bronchi that has cartilage, terminal bronchiole that has cartilage. As long as you have cartilage, that airway passage cannot collapse. Okay? As long as you have cartilage, that airway passage cannot collapse. Your respiratory bronchiole does not have cartilage, which means it can collapse. So what happens with people with COPD or emphysema, especially with COPD, is if you've ever looked at them, what does their chest look like? Nobody's seen somebody with COPD? Their chest looks like what's called barrel chested. The reason why is because it's easy for them to get the air in, they can't get the air out. So air gets into the alveoli, but when they're trying to squeeze the air out, the respiratory bronchiole collapses. So air gets in, but it can't get out. Next time you take a breath in, more air gets in, but it can't get out. So the problem that they have is they can't get the air out. So if you've ever watched them breathe, they always purse their lips or make the opening smaller. And the reason why they're doing that creates back pressure. If you have back pressure in this tube, the respiratory bronchiole can't fall, can't collapse, because the air on the inside of the tube is keeping it open. Okay? So that's why they purse their lips and breathe in that certain way. But it's because the respiratory bronchioles collapse because there's no cartilage. That's the only part that collapses. So now, the respiratory bronchiole doesn't have cartilage, but it has the start of what is called the alveoli. That are these great cluster-looking things. You see these bulges right here? See all of this bulges?
Yeah.
That's the alveoli. That is what actually allows you to exchange gases. So if you take this and you make it bigger, this is what you have. The lung capillaries are on the outside. Air would come in here, and what happens is it diffuses. So you see how thick this is? Obviously, this is a much bigger representation of what's here, and this is obviously much bigger than what's in your lungs. So you see how thick this is? This is essentially the 3 layers that your air has to cross. So where the red is, that's the capillaries, that's your blood system. Where the light white colored or the can colored portion is, that's called the alveoli. That's your type 1 pneumocytes. I don't think those are in there, but just alveoli, okay? This is where the air is. So the air has to cross the alveoli. There's what's called a basement membrane, and then the blood vessels. So it's like a peanut butter sandwich. It's like 2 pieces of bread with like peanut butter in it. Those are the 3 layers at a minimum. Now, when you have pneumonia, right, or you have fluid in your lungs, what is it gonna do? Where does that fluid collect? That fluid collects here on the inside. So what does that do to the thickness? Makes it thicker, right? So if it makes it thicker, the normal amount of gas that you have in there, is it gonna be easy or harder for it to cross into the blood?
Harder.
Harder. So this is why people have pneumonia, where they have fluid in their lungs. You have to put them on oxygen because you gotta drive more oxygen into this area to drive it into the blood vessel, because this is too thick. You have to create a larger concentration gradient. You wanna understand that?
Yeah.
So if they have fluid in the lungs, like over time when you don't have pneumonia, does the thickness like kind of go back to normal?
Yeah, the fluid will reabsorb back into the tissues.
Okay.
But if you continually have fluid, like when you have lung cancer is the only thing, you could take out 2 liters of fluid, the very next day you'll have 2 liters of fluid.
Okay.
If you keep having that much fluid in your lungs, like 99% you have lung cancer. That's the only thing that makes that much fluid in like 24 hours. Okay? So that's the thickness. So whatever causes this area, the alveoli, the blood vessels, or the basement membrane to get inflamed, to get thicker, it makes it harder for the gases to cross. So oxygen is gonna go from here into the blood. Carbon dioxide is gonna go from the blood in here, and then you breathe it out. So when you breathe it out, it's gonna go through the alveolar ducts. If you look at this picture, you see how there's a hole in there? There's a hole there. You guys see it? That hole is the alveolar duct, okay? So what's happening is all of those things, like right here, right here, right here, there's a channel that's filtering into the respiratory bronchiole, terminal bronchiole, and up.
Do
So
they all
that's,
have those?
well, everyone does. So that alveolar duct is on the inside, and then it ends in these alveolar sacs. When the sacs are damaged, you have problems with oxygenation. So anything, it could be lung cancer, it could be lung damage. Most of you are too young to know, but back in the day, asbestos was a big problem, right? Asbestos was used in shingling, tar, asphalt, insulation especially. The problem with asbestos is you breathe it in, and if you look at asbestos under a microscope, it's like a needle. It's sharp on both ends. So that needle-shaped asbestos will go down. It has no problem getting down, but once it makes it in here, it can't really get out. So when it can't get out and it's just spinning around, that needle is just slicing up the inside of your alveoli. And when you slice it up, what happens to your alveoli? Damage. And then what happens when your tissue is damaged? What does your body do?
You
Breathe
go out.
properly.
Inflammation.
Inflammation, and then what it'll do eventually? Repair, right? You repair, it'll heal. Then you damage it again, and it'll heal again. It'll damage it again,
Oh, you're scarring.
and you're scarring, right? And then eventually one of those cells that's in the process of regenerating will go crazy, and now you have lung cancer. Lung cancer is basically cells that are uncontrolled. Cancer is basically cells that are not controlled. They just divide rapidly. So what happens is anything that damages the area has the potential to turn it into lung cancer because you have repeated trauma, you heal, and in the process of healing, one of them goes crazy, the safety mechanisms shut off, and it turns into cancer. That's how you get cancer from asbestos or anything that ends up here. When you smoke, cigarettes have something like 60 to 80,000 different molecules in them. 20,000 of them are known carcinogens. When they come in, they irritate the lining, they damage it, and if you continually do it, you'll end up with lung cancer. That's how you get cancer in your lungs, right? COVID went down, it gets this far. When it damages here, you have problems oxygenating. So what was the issue when COVID first came around and people couldn't maintain oxygen saturation? What did we do? You put them on a ventilator. So the way the ventilator works is what? You're pushing the air in. So if you take this, which is already damaged, and you blow it up even more, what's gonna happen? More damage. What's gonna happen?
You're gonna need it to breathe at that point.
The lungs gonna inflate or get bigger?
Bigger, and then
Rupture.
rupture. That's what was happening. This is why putting you on a ventilator was a death sentence, because your lungs are already damaged. You keep forcing air in, it'll get bigger and bigger to the point where it'll pop. When these pop, they're no longer working. Your lungs are gone. That's why people died on ventilators, because you were overinflating already damaged lungs.
So the first line of treatment before that was ventilating the patients was actually wrong?
No, I mean, if you were intubated because you couldn't maintain oxygen saturation.
I mean, that was all.
So the last thing is intubation. Intubation was a 50-50 shot. You either had a chance to make it or your lungs popped and you died.
What's the purpose of proning?
Proning was so depended on certain people. If you have, if this is your lung, let's say the front got damaged, that's where all the COVID went. If you prone, right, if you put them supine on their back or you prone, you put them on their belly, now what's happening is all the air is getting to the undamaged portion, so you have better oxygenation. But it was a 50-50 hit. Proning may work, may not have worked. If this part of your lungs are damaged and you prone them, you're killing them, because the good part is not getting the air. Remember, air will do what?
Rise.
Air is gonna rise. So even in your lungs, this part of your lungs gets a lot more aeration than the bottom part. Your blood is a liquid, and what do liquids do on this planet? They settle, they fall. So majority of the blood in your lungs is below the 2/3 line. You do have blood up here, but not as much. So about 2/3 of the way down your lungs, you have almost a perfect ratio of aeration to blood. So when you prone, the blood's pooling here, but there's some blood that does get up here, but this is the part of the lung that wasn't damaged, and if it wasn't damaged and you prone them, you're oxygenating them better. If this part of the lung was damaged and you prone them, you're killing them. So that's why it worked on some people and didn't work on everybody. That was the whole point of prone. All right, any questions on what I explained here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. So what's the red part called?